Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast, your safe haven for self-discovery, growth, and transformation. I'm Barbara Thompson, your host. I'm a therapist and the founder of Self-Care Studio. Whether you're joining me from my private counselling sessions, my courses, or right here on this podcast, I'm dedicated to helping you reconnect with yourself and live life authentically. This podcast is your reminder to pause, reflect, and reclaim your power. Together we'll explore the messy, beautiful journey of life, from letting go of people-pleasing and overthinking to embracing your worth and stepping boldly into your true self. Here, you're not just a listener, you're part of a community that values self-trust, self-love, and living life on your terms. So whether you're navigating challenges, seeking clarity, or simply craving a dose of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with me. Let's dive into today's episode and continue this journey together. Hello everyone, it is so lovely to have you here today. I think I always say that when I start a podcast or start an episode, but I actually genuinely mean it when I'm on here and I'm doing this podcast. And today I have Daniel. Now, Daniel Tolson is actually in Taiwan at the moment, and he came on my radar because it's something that I haven't talked about AI. I haven't talked about anything to do with technology, the mind-body connection, anything like that. So I'm going to pass the microphone over to you, Daniel. You'll do a better job than me. Can you introduce yourself to my audience and just give them a snippet of how amazing you are and what your gifts are that you bring to us in the world?
My clients want three things from me, and they all start with the letter I. They want influence, impact, and income. So the people that I work with really, they want to become a better leader. And to become a better leader, you've got to be able to catapult your influence. You need to have influence over people. You've also got to have influence over yourself. They also want to accelerate their impact. I'm 45 this year, and a lot of my clients are men and women who are coming into their 40s, and they say, we've been on this planet for 40 years, and I want to achieve more, I want to be more, I want to have more this year than the previous year. So they want to get things faster. And also they want to be able to unleash new income levels. And when we talk about money, it's not money for material things. And one of my clients in America, I asked him, I said, what do you want to do with all this extra money you're going to earn this year? And he said, well, Daniel, the goal is 5 billion this year. And I said, what was the goal last year? He said, 4 billion. And I always ask my clients, why is that important to you? And he said, Daniel, if we can do an extra billion in revenue, we can feed an extra 2 million homeless families this year. Wow. And so what they want is they want influence, they want impact, and they want income to make a difference in their community. So in summary, it's to help people become a better leader. And that's what I do. Wow.
Okay. So this episode is for people that I think could be business owners, could be mum and dad, could be anyone really. I think anyone will get something out of this episode. It's all to do with it encompasses everything that I do as a human being, as an individual, what I've gone through personally, professionally as a therapist. This ties in with that. And I'm quite intrigued. You have this kind of AI technology called, and I'm going to read it, vocal biomarker technology. And we're going to get into this today. And I'm very skeptical at first because I was like, I understand AI. It's really fantastic. I was a kid, I'm 45 this year too. And it's like, I was a kid that grew up with the Jetsons and wondered if there would ever be spaceships and flying cars and all that and robots. And so AI technology is very interesting. It's great. But I was skeptical as how can I read a script, it can hear my voice and it can interpret everything to how I'm feeling emotionally, physically, health, how my left and right side of the brain works. And I'm like, as I'm reading the script, as you've kindly gifted this beautiful thing for me that I can share with my audience, I'm like, whatever, is this really going to sum me up? And as I was reading it, and that's just me being completely honest, as I was reading it, I was like, I'll do the thing, roll my eyes, let's see what comes up.
It's a normal experience to have. I remember when I first became a coach, I had heard a lot about disc reports, and it was coming from HR because I was working with Emirates Airline and I was in the Middle East, and I'd hear people referred to as he's just a D style, or she's an I style, or they're an S style or a C style, and I heard people being categorised and put into a box. But for me, coaching was all about getting people out of the box and to de-nominalise and also de-identify from some of those labels. So I'd heard about different types of technology, and in 2016 I met a workplace psychologist, a very well-known American, and I got talking to her and she said, Daniel, have you ever completed one of these reports before? And I said, no, I'm pretty sceptical. I heard a lot in HR about this and it really turned me off. She said, well, just complete this report and then we'll break down the results and you tell me what's true or what's false for you. Mm-hmm. So in 2016, I just trusted in the science and I completed this online assessment, and it probably took me about 25 minutes. I flew to America. I sat down in front of the psychologist with my wife next to me, and she pulled out this 70-page report. And she said, Daniel, we're going to go through this today. And she said, I'm just going to read these descriptors and you tell me what's true or false for you. And my response was, that's true, that's true, that's true, that's true. And after a couple of minutes, I looked at my wife and I said, wife, did you rat out on me? Because how could people possibly know this about me? This report I answered like yes and no, yes and no, yes and no. How could it figure that out? And so human behaviour is predictable. And what we have today is we have different types of sciences to help us understand who we are. And this is what the Mind Report does, is the Mind Report looks at us like an X-ray. An X-ray, we can see physical things. We can see joints and bones and teeth and breast tissue with an X-ray, but we can't see mindset. With Mind Report, we're looking at Mind Report. We're looking at who we are as an emotional being, who we are as a spiritual being. Mind Report looks at our behaviours and it lets us know how we're programmed. And once we understand how we're programmed, we can make better decisions lead to better actions, and then we get the right results, which also means we make a lot less mistakes. So Mind Report's like an X-ray, but we're seeing the invisible things rather than physical things.
Wow. Yeah, because a lot of people, we operate on autopilot. So whether 100%. We're a leader of a multinational billion-dollar company or we are a stay-at-home mum or anything, we all have this thing of how we do things, like how we brush our teeth, how we tie our shoes, and we actually kind of pass it forward to our children, to the next generation. But what we also do is we've got the stuff that we've learned from our parents, the teachers, and a lot of people. Just the key thing that I love working with people is just the awareness. The number of times I have someone online or in front of me in person that's saying the words that I can't, and I'll just go, hang on, did you realize how many times you said this word or this word? They'll go, no. And I'll go, you've just said it 4 or 5 times. Oh, did I? So sometimes something like that, I find awareness is key. So this report, this technology, after we're finished today, I think would be, game changer for like my business or working with people. It gives you that real insights. Like people always lie to me as a therapist. That's any therapist would be on, like, yes. But people sit in front of me and tell me a story and I'm like, sure. And then maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, they come back and go, oh, you know how I told you? And I look at them and I go, and it blows their mind. I tell them something, they go, how did you know? Because I've either been there and I've done everything and I've ticked the box.
You've seen the pattern.
Yep. I've done it myself. So I'm like, hey, I've been there too. Or just through their body language and just this inner knowing of how I work with clients. I just know. And it's not about me being right. I'm not perfect. I never will be. I don't want to be. I'm just a human walking along in this life that I want to reach out my hand to someone. In my tough days, I had no one. And I had to really everyone's like, oh, you're so strong and you're so strong. Yes, I am. But just because you're a strong person, we all need someone. We all need community. We all need help. And we all need So I want to reach out my hand to someone and go, hey, this took me 10 years to get through. Let's do it together, and let's shorten that time for you, or just to have that awareness. And for me, just to sit in front of you and not judge you, and actually just come from a place of love. It's not, I'm not any, even though in therapy there's an imbalance. Same with, that's why I could never do corporate because you have someone at the top that tells you what to do. And I'm always like, we're all equal. Yes, we have different jobs, but I would literally, in my job in New Zealand, I was very high up in marketing, and I would go and knock, people were like, oh, Barbara, you can't do that. I'd knock on the CEO's door and go, hey, mate, have you got a couple of minutes? He's like, yeah, sure. And everyone's like, oh my God, Barbara's going into his office. Oh my God, you didn't book a time. And I'm like, he's just a normal human being. Like, even someone that was the most famous person in the world, if I met them, hey, how are you? They're like, oh my God, that's so-and-so. I don't care. We're all normal people. And I think, and then when I go out to the boys in the warehouse, I'd be like, I'd talk to them, obviously slightly different because I mirror people, but I'd still talk to them almost the same as the CEO, just slightly different because they're normal people.
Well, people are predictable, and how people behave can be quantified. How people behave in New Zealand will be similar to how people behave in Sydney. And if you go to New York, you'll see these patterns of behaviour. And as a pattern detector, as therapists and coaches are, you see these patterns, and then you can start to predict what's going to happen for people when they have those particular behaviours. And one thing which you said was very interesting there is about it's about building rapport with people. The more sensitive we are to other people and we have greater levels of sensory acuity, the easier it is for us to see certain behaviours and certain emotions. You know, we have more than 60,000 thoughts per day. 95% of those are on repeat, and 80% are negative by nature. We know this about humans. We also know that the average person has heard the word no, you can't do that, you're not good enough, you're not skilled enough, you're not talented enough. They've heard that 130,000 times before they turn 18. Also, people from lower socioeconomic areas will hear disruptive patterns from their parents 600,000 times more often than positive commands. So, for example, the parents will say, you can't do that 600,000 times more often than you can do that. But then upper class families will hear positive commands 100,000 times more than negative commands. And so we can see this in people. And when we know how people behave, we can predict what they're going to do.
Because we
and
like
we can help them avoid
certainty.
it.
That's right. Human beings, we all want one thing, and that's certainty. And people, I don't know, like the level of people, the level that you coach at, I imagine like it's kind of the upper end of where I'm at with my clients is people can't sit still. You have a certain type of personality that's driven and successful and has all the things. But when I say to them, hey, let's slow down, let's sit with this, they freak out. I can't sit still. I can't be with myself. I can't be alone. I've got to go, 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 go. If I stop, it means that I'm lazy and that I'm not good enough. And it's so interesting, isn't it? How
Type A personalities. If I'm working, I'm worthy. If I'm not working, I'm not worthy.
But that's true. But the interesting fact, I think, is as human beings, we all of us, I believe, have this inner knowing of I'm not good enough. No matter how much money you come from, no matter what background, no matter what country, wherever you are in the corners of the world, I genuinely believe that the core value of everyone deep, deep, deep down is I'm not good enough. And people go, how do you know? And I'm like, we all have it. It's that inner, it could be very quiet. It's like almost like a radio dial. Like it could be very, people say, oh yeah, I feel like I'm not good enough. Well, that's why you get the next Lambo, or you get this, because deep down, if you cut all the BS out of it, it's like, I actually don't feel good enough. And these things make me feel good for a fleeting moment.
I learned about humans that everybody wants to get a result. So everybody wants results. Everybody wants recognition. Everybody wants relationships, and everybody wants to avoid risk. And along with that comes different emotions. Everybody has a fear of being taken advantage of. Everybody has a fear of rejection. Everybody has a fear of losing their stability. and everybody wants to get things right, and they fear making mistakes. And that's the same for everybody in every corner of the world. And through our personal evolution, we learn how to manage and regulate that more effectively. And so it's programmed into our behaviors. And then as we grow older, as we start to mature emotionally, we start to get a better awareness of it. And we can even categorize it. I talk a lot about emotional intelligence. And with emotional intelligence, there's 5 pillars. The first pillar of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And everybody's trying to figure out, why do I think and feel the way that I do? Everybody wants to know, why do I think like this? Why do I feel like that? Why do I feel that I'm not good enough? Why do I feel like I'm an imposter? Yeah. We all want to know that. And with self-awareness, we say, if you can't name it, you can't tame it. So we've got to figure out what's the root cause of this imposter syndrome. And with technology like Mind Report, we can identify the root cause, where it comes from. Secondly, with emotional intelligence, the second pillar is self-regulation. So if we can't name it, we can't tame it. But if we can figure out what the root cause is, we can start to manage our behaviors and we can have better coping mechanisms. Thirdly, it's motivation. I've never met somebody who says, I want to be less motivated. Everybody wants more motivation. But they, especially people in the Western world, most of our focus is materialistic. What's the next Lamborghini? Okay, I just got that one. My next door neighbor got a better one. I better get a bigger one. You know, what's the next watch? And there's 3 types of motivation. There's biological motivation. Everybody's motivated. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. Everybody's motivated. And we've got to eat. We've got to sleep. We've got to perform the basics. And if you're hungry, you'll get out of bed. If you're tired, you'll go to bed. If you need food, you'll do whatever it takes to eat. So everybody's motivated. But the second level of motivation is extrinsic motivation. And extrinsic motivation is about reward and punish. And this is what salespeople hate, because the boss says, if you earn $100,000 this year, I'll give you a 10% share. But that salesperson could bring in $99,999 worth of commissions and not get a bonus. And if they know it's not going to happen, all the motivation disappears.
Yeah.
So all of us are looking for that third level of motivation, which is that intrinsic motivation. And for you as a therapist, you've found what you love. And you'd probably even do therapy if you didn't get paid for it, just because it feels so good. If a client's going to book in at 5 o'clock in the morning and you've got to get up early, you'll probably do it just because you love it. Yeah. If a client says, hey, I need help at 10 o'clock at night, you'll probably jump on a call because you just love to do it.
Yeah.
You don't need motivation. It's just you're doing what you love and it's always there. So they're the 3 first pillars of emotional intelligence. And everybody wants to know who they are. Everybody wants to overcome stress. And everybody wants more motivation. And through technologies like this, they can just get that a lot faster.
How cool is that? That's
so
okay. Cool. I'm slowly opening my mind to it. Sounds good so far. Sounds good.
Have you heard of a gentleman by the name of Daniel Goleman at all?
No, I actually haven't. No.
Daniel Goleman wrote a really good book many years ago called Emotional IQ. And emotional intelligence is a soft skill, and it's one of 8 core competencies that all leaders have to develop. And a lot of people hear the word leadership and they say, I'm not a leader. Well, leadership involves 2 components. The first component is personal leadership. And what that means is we all have to get results in our own life. So many people on the 31st of December set a goal to lose weight. So many people set a goal to earn more money. So many people set a goal to have a new relationship. And so once we understand what we want, we can start to go for it. But it comes back to emotional intelligence. It's also one of the highest paid skills on the planet. People who are more emotional intelligent earn on average 1,750 Australian dollars more per 1 point increase in emotional intelligence. So one of my clients just last year, he increased his sales income by $500,000 in 1 year. He didn't learn new sales skills. He didn't learn new marketing skills. He just improved himself as a leader by becoming more emotionally intelligent.
Mm.
Not
So that's
bad.
the thing that people miss out.
It
They
is. It's a
and when they book and see me, I mean, I think when they come and see you, they'll pretty much more ready than when they are to see me. When they see you, you might have to give them a bit of a come on in. But with me, it's like they have to kind of strike when the fire's hot. That's why I'm pretty quick at getting back to people if I can, because
Mhm.
that window of oh, I'm going through a really tough time, or this thing keeps happening,
Yeah,
or I've had this distress, I need to reach out to someone. When they do that, I can guarantee within the 24 hours or 48 hours, that feeling has gone, or has got to the point where a lot of people will be like, oh, I think I can manage this myself. Oh, I'll be okay. And then they kind of, I don't want to book the appointment with Barbara, and then
yeah.
they'll leave it for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and then it will come up. But when it comes up, it's heavier and it's harder and it stays for
Comes back
longer.
with a
And it's,
vengeance.
yeah. And then people leave it. So it's this roller coaster of, that's what I say to people, it's never going to go away.
Mm. Have you heard
Yeah.
of the emotional equation before?
Mm-mm. No.
This is something I learned years ago, and I think it's a good one for everybody to understand, is that one negative emotion, it impacts your performance for 4 hours. One negative emotion. It impacts your personal performance for 4 hours. But the most fascinating thing, the emotion only lasts for about 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and then it disappears.
Right.
But the impact that it has on the mind and body lasts for 4 hours. Now, every time you have another negative event after that, it multiplies. So if you have a second negative emotion or negative event, it multiplies. So it doesn't impact your performance now for 4 hours, it impacts your performance for 8 hours. But to be able to cancel out one negative emotion, you have to experience 5 positive events. And
Right.
what we've been taught in society is that if you're feeling bad, go shopping. And a lot of things like this happen in our business. People will talk to us and say, I'm feeling so depressed. I'm so stressed. I'm so anxious. And then they'll buy a new Louis Vuitton handbag and they'll feel fantastic
For a moment.
for a moment,
Yeah.
temporarily. And so that's the emotional equation. We need to have 5 positive events just to cancel out one negative event. If we put that in, if we contrasted that, the metaphor would be eating one hamburger and running on the treadmill for 4 hours. If you
Yeah.
realize that's what you had to do to burn off the calories, you wouldn't do it. But because emotions are so invisible and the emotion only lasts for 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, it comes and goes. But then we slip into a mood. And these moods that we can get into, they can last days, weeks, months, or years. And over time, we become emotionally numb. What's emotionally numb? It's like spraying on perfume in the morning. You put on your favorite perfume, you put on your J'adore or whatever you're wearing, and you can smell it. It projects for about 2 or 3 hours and it smells lovely. By the end of the afternoon, you've become accustomed to that smell and you don't smell the perfume on your skin. But somebody who walks past you says, Barbara, my gosh, you smell fantastic. And you go, did I put on my perfume today?
Yeah.
It's still there. Everybody else can smell it. So the point is that we get into these moods, but we become emotionally numb to them. We numb ourselves. And a lot of there's some statistics recently that 80% of visits to your general practitioner, your doctor, are for stress, anxiety, and depression.
Yeah.
But only 3% of people get support. 97% of people don't. So because that emotion is so powerful, they have to find a way to numb themselves. What do? We listen to Spotify. We watch YouTube. We eat food. We have retail therapy. We engage in gossip, all just to numb that feeling.
Or people
And
vape,
vape,
and then the normal stuff, vaping, drinking, drugs, gambling, sex, all of it.
all of that,
Yeah. Because it
all of
takes
those
you
things.
away, and that it's interesting. I work with some kids as well, and I have a way over time that I've explained how our brain works. And even when the
Mm,
parents sit in there, I can see the parents like, this is really good. And I really go back to the caveman days. I say to them, like, your brain hasn't had an update since then, because the kids understand. You know how your phone has an update, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, our brain that's in your head right now hasn't had an update. And they're like,
mm.
Oh, and then I go back and talk to them about caveman days and how we were as tribes and why women remember everything and why guys just go and get the food and have sex, and that's basically what they're made to do. We haven't changed since then.
Mm.
And that's why we struggle in today's world. And when I kind of put that to my clients, and from that point of view, they go, oh my God. And I explain to them, we're hardwired negative. So we're
Mm.
really comfortable as human beings to be negative. It doesn't feel nice. And we're
Mm.
always hard on ourselves, but that's almost like, I like to say that's our, what am I trying to say? Like that level point, like being
Mm.
comfortable is that entry level is
The
being.
homeostasis.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's what I wanted to say,
Mm.
is we're negative and we're
Mm.
hardwired negative, and then after a while it becomes our normal. Like you said, we get numb, but it's
Mm.
also quite
It's a,
comfortable.
it's a survival mechanism. You know,
Yeah.
hopefully we can swear here.
Yes, you can.
The basic human experience consists of three F's: feeding, fighting, and fucking. That's it. That's human existence. You got to eat.
Sounds good.
You got to fight. You got to fight for the food. You got to fight for shelter. You got to fight for the business, and then you got to reproduce.
Yeah.
And that's the basic human existence: feeding, fighting, and fucking. That's survival. And we are programmed for survival, not to thrive. We are not programmed to thrive. It's just to survive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if we think about linguistics and language, you ask an Aussie friend, "G'day, mate, how you going?" "Not bad." "How's the missus?" "Well, we're not divorced yet." "How are the kids?" "Well, they're not in jail." Everything's an away from. But
Wow.
how do we survive? We survive by not dying. What do we say to the kids? Don't run out on the street. Don't touch the hot fire. Don't go out there with your shoelaces undone. It's just about survival. And that's why people find it hard to get out of that. But that's a good sign because they're starting to awaken. They're starting to say, I want more things in life. I want to become more. I want to do more. I want to have more. But they've got to have that awareness. And we summarize that and we say a check up from the neck up. You've got to upgrade the mindset.
Yep, from the neck
But
up.
it's invisible. And this
Yeah.
is the thing. So I can go to Louis Vuitton and I can buy a wallet or a handbag. It's tangible.
You can see
But
it.
my mindset, my emotions, my feelings, my thoughts, they're intangible. They're invisible. And humans aren't people of faith. Faith is about believing in the invisible. If people were people of faith, they would invest in themselves 100%. They would go all in. But they're not people of faith. We live in a world that values tangible things like the Lamborghini, like the Rolex, things that we can show. But how do I prove to you my level of peace of mind? How do I prove that to you? You can't see it. You can't measure it. And this is the challenge. And this is the challenge of the Western world. Here in Taiwan, where I live, we value peace of mind. We value spirituality. We value having a connection with the divine. But when humans develop at around about 7 months of age, we have two soft spots on the head. I think they call it the frontal or the frontal. And there's two soft spots, one here and one at the back. Now, spiritually, and this goes back more than 5,000 years into Chinese medicine and the beliefs of the Hindus, is that when these two soft spots in the skull close up, we actually lose our spiritual connection with the divine. We no longer are connected to the God or the consciousness on the planet. And that conversation doesn't tend to start to happen until we're approaching our death. Now, my grandfather, I loved him, but he was a bit of a wild boy. And when it was time for him to pass over, he was afraid to go to purgatory. He was afraid that he was going to get punished for all the nasty things that he had done throughout his life. So he was calling the priest, "Come down to the hospital, please cleanse me of all my sins." He got remarried to my grandmother. And what happens is before we die, we start to consider, where are we going? What's happening next? We've blocked it out for 70 years,
Yeah.
but now we've got to consider the afterlife. But here in Taiwan, it's an open discussion. It's a conversation we're constantly having, and we value people who have peace of mind. We respect people who have psychic and intuitive abilities. We value the intangibles a lot more in the Eastern world than in the Western world.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you, obviously through my report, you'll be able to see a bit about me if this works.
Yeah, let's have a look.
I've come from a world where there was a lot of money and all that stuff, and I feel like as someone that's on kind of mentally and spiritually on the other side, is that's just a filler for the stuff. That's almost for me almost a red flag now of where's the first thing if I was to meet someone that was at that level, you've got all the toys, got all the things, great. Where are you at mentally and spiritually? Because that's where I'm going to go first, because that's going to tell me everything. Are you getting these things just because you like a nice car? I like cars, I'm a car person, I get it. Or are you just ticking the box to make other people to feel like, so we want everyone to like us. We want to be liked. We want to be accepted. We want to be validated. We want to be loved. And part of that materialistic side is like, if anyone's listening to this, when you're a teenager, it was like you had to have the Mambo, or you had to have Nike, or you had to have Converse.
26 red.
Oh, I remember that. I remember that. There was a
Stussy.
Yes,
Early
I think
days.
Dean Barker from Barker's Men's Clothing. It was a men's clothing shop.
Mm-hmm.
He did some yacht racing and stuff as well. Our whole year at private girls' school that I went to, all the girls there, we got onto this thing where we were wearing men's clothing, Barker's men's clothing, and we had to wear like tracksuit pants, the t-shirt, men's clothing line, but if you weren't wearing it, you weren't cool. So isn't that interesting, is sometimes these materialistic things make us feel part of that tribe, and especially when you're at school and when you're really young in those teenage years, you don't want to stand out. You do, but you want to be like everyone else and have all the labels and have all the things. So you're like, oh, cool, I'm like everyone else. So and then your nervous system, if you're not, like I say to my young teens that I work with, the reason why you get so freaked out and get so anxious if someone rolls that, girls are very good at giving you one look and you know what it's like. If the guys are listening to this, your wife or your girlfriend will give you one look and it will give you everything you need to know. We're very good at that. So especially with young teenagers, it could just be a side eye or something like that. And I just say to them that can tell you everything, but that dysregulates your nervous system to feel like you're going to die. And my teenage girls go, what do you mean? I was like, well, back in the caveman days, if we weren't accepted by the tribe, like if you and me wanted to go out and, oh, this is boring, because that's probably what I would have done back in the day. I was in the tribe. I definitely would have been, hey, I'm not following this chief. He's a dick. Let's go somewhere else. And me and my friend would have gone. And I said, the chief would have shot us straight away because Barbara's going off and you're going to attract attention to my tribe. Bang, bang. Or the lion or tiger's going to get us and there's two against that, we're dead. Or we're going to walk for days on end and not find water or food and we're going to die. So that's why when that girl gives you an eye roll at school or you're not wearing the labelled clothing and you get left out, your nervous system, I'm not accepted, I'm not liked, I'm going to die. And I know that sounds quite brutal, but your body doesn't know any different. And that's when the anxiety and the stress, people go, oh, just the awareness piece of how our bodies are made to function. When people understand that, I feel like they're like, oh, it's not just me. Oh, that makes perfect sense, because it does.
We call this a values level 2 thinking. And here that values level 2 thinking is very rich in Taiwan. So if you're obedient to the family, if you're obedient to the tribe or the elder, then you'll be safe and protected from the fearful things out there. But if you aren't subservient, if you don't say yes to the elders, then you become an outcast. And now you've got to go and hunt and protect yourself. But once you go out there by yourself, you realise that there's bigger, badder son of a bitches than you. There's people nastier. They got a bigger stick. They got a bigger gun, and they can hurt you.
Yeah.
And so what we tend to do is we tend to run back to the tribe and we say, yes, sir. No, sir. 3 bags full, sir. Yes, let me back in.
You're saying if I did run off, I'd come back.
Yeah, because we go back for the safety and the protection. And that's very rich in here. And in the Australian society, we tend to operate from a values level 3, 5 and 6 paradigm. And what we can see at the moment is there's a lot of violence that's flowing out onto the streets. I know in Australia, just from watching the news from here in Taiwan, there's been 7 major stabbings in the past week in Australia. And what's happening is people aren't following the rule of the law, which is values level 4. They look at the law and say, I can do anything that I want and you're not going to punish me, especially if I'm under 18.
Mm.
And so these young people, the number of stabbings have increased rapidly from an age group of like 13 to 15-year-old boys because they know they can stab someone and get away with it. There's nobody to control them. Now, what's the root cause of that? The root cause is that during the pandemic, the police and the government had a lot of powers to arrest Middle Eastern crime gangs and crime syndicates, and they put them in jail. So those big, bad son of a bitches were controlling the little buggers on the street, but now they're in jail. These little ones are running wild.
Yeah.
And they look at the law and say, you're not going to do anything to me. If you're going to do anything to me, you're going to be a slap on the wrist, and I'm going to be in and out by tomorrow.
Yep.
And that's values level 3 and 4. We also have a very rich values level 5 culture in Australia, and that's the culture of the entrepreneur. That's the person who says, I don't want to work for the government. I don't want to work for the corporate. I'm going to go out and I'm going to make my own money. I'm going to take all the risk and I'm going to enjoy all of the rewards. And so that's very materialistic. We also have an awakening of the values level 6 community in Australia, and these people are interested in spirituality. They're saying, you know what, I'm sick of having to fight for everything. I realise that the government is not going to keep me safe, even though Trump says Trump's going to fix it. I know they're not going to fix any of my personal problems. I've got to do it myself.
Yeah.
But then they experience that materialism and they get the watch, they get the car, they get the house, they get the TV, and they don't feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
And so they start to look for community, and they're looking for other like-minded people. They're saying, I want to explore my inner world. I want to come to know my inner world. What's my purpose on this planet? Why am I here? There's got to be more to this than just cars and houses. And so there's this big awakening in Australia at the moment of people saying, I want to get to know my inner world. They're not saying, I want to go to church. They're not saying, I want to go to the mosque. They're asking for spirituality. And I think that's where a lot of your good work comes in. You're focusing a lot on the mind and the body. Rather than these individuals being told who they are, they want to figure it out for themselves with a little bit of guidance on the way.
Yeah.
And this is a big emergence.
You mentioned to me before, and it's how I've trained, even though I've got the bit of paper to say I'm a therapist, I feel like this has always been within me, as I can connect with anyone, talk to anyone, hang out with anyone. But what I see is people, like you said, people know themselves better than anyone.
Yep.
And who am I? Who am I to tell people what to do? As therapists, we can't. And I'm so taken back by how many people, when I'm not their first therapist, if I am, bit of pressure, but I quite like that. But a lot of times people come to me and I'll always say, hey, who have you seen before? What type of therapist? Tell me the good things and tell me the bad things. So it gives me a really good level. And the number of times I've had people say to me, oh, the therapist told me to leave my husband. The therapist told me to do this. And I'm like, sorry. And they're like, oh, you seem quite disturbed by this. I'm like, yes, ethically, we're not actually allowed to tell people what to do. People think you go to therapy and people go, oh, that's a problem. Oh, here we go. Here's the blueprint. 1, 2, 3. No, because who am I? I'm Barbara Thompson. Who am I to tell you what to do? This is your life. You've got to feel comfortable. There's no judgment. I'm just here how many places do you have that you can talk about your emotions and how you feel? I'm not your
can't say it to my mum.
Yeah. I'm
Can't
not your auntie. I'm not your mum. I'm not your friends where it's going to go around at wino, like when you go down to the club and have wines and you say to your girlfriend or your guy mates, you actually get vulnerable and say something. And the next time you go down, they're like, oh, Barbara, heard that you had a bit of anxiety, or heard that you cheated on this person or this person. And it's like, so going to therapy is a sacred place. And I take that very seriously. It's sacred. There's no judgment because I've done everything in my life. The things that I never thought I would have done, I've done.
There's a state in psychology, and it's called an unconditional positive regard. And it's where your therapist creates a safe space for you, where you won't be judged on anything that you've done or anything that you've thought about doing. And it's that sacred space there that enables people to open up. And eventually they open up long enough, they have a Freudian slip. And the thing that they really want to say that they can't say to anybody else, it comes out in therapy and they go, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I just said that. So keep going. And that's that sacred space. And one thing that has blown my mind over the years is exploring guilt. And in our culture, women are guilt throwers and men are guilt catchers. Now, what I mean by that is parents quickly learn that you can give kids a slap over the bum with the belt or the wooden spoon and it doesn't change their behaviour, but it leaves a big mark. So what parents tend to do is they tend to use guilt to manipulate the child's behaviour. If you don't clean up your room, I'm going to take away your PlayStation. And so we're leveraging an emotion, it's guilt, but then it's overused throughout our society. And so exploring guilt, I realised that there's actually 5 different forms of guilt. And when I explored that, it made so much sense. The first type of guilt we experience is guilt for things we've done. What's an example? If I set a New Year's resolution on the 31st of December and say, I'm not going to eat chocolate. If I eat chocolate, I automatically feel guilty. That's not a bad thing. That's a positive thing. It's there as a warning from the unconscious mind that you've just broken your own moral code. And it gives you an opportunity to course correct. That's the first form of guilt. Everybody's experienced that one. The second form of guilt is for things that we want to do. So, sometimes you want to tell a friend to shut the fuck up, zip your mouth, or you have this picture in your head of like, I want to just punch that person in the neck to tell them to shut the fuck up. The thought of doing that actually makes you feel guilty because your mind doesn't know the difference between something that you actively imagine and something that you do physically. So punching somebody in the face, saying shut the fuck up, it breaks your own moral code and automatically you feel guilty and you regulate your behavior. You go, okay, I don't like the way that feels. I better not do that. I think everybody's experienced that. The third type of guilt is for guilt for things that we want to do, but we haven't done. So whenever we set a goal and we don't take action on it, we feel guilty. And we remember that guilt when we set the next goal. And we think to ourselves, hey, last time I set a goal, I didn't go after it. Now I've got guilt. And we carry a lot of guilt for all the things that we want to do. So if we all thought about it, how many things have we imagined throughout our lifetime that we've wanted to do? I want to leave New Zealand. How many people want to leave New Zealand but never have? How many people have wanted to travel to Asia or the Middle East but they're too afraid? It evokes guilt inside of us. How many people want to tell their boss, don't speak to me like that anymore, but they never do it and they carry the guilt? The fourth type of guilt is what we call survivor guilt. And all of us have had this. It's when we've been in a relationship with a family member or friend and we want to help them and we help them. And then we wake up one day and we say, this person doesn't even want to help themselves. So why should I help them if they're not willing to help themselves? And then one day we have to get on with our life. And we say to the other person, I'm so sorry. There's nothing else I can give you anymore. I've given you my time. I've given you my money. I've given you my perspective. And you haven't done anything to change your life. I've got to go. I've got to get out of this environment and move on. And it's the moment that we leave, we start to feel guilt. We start to think to ourselves, should have I done more? Should have I made more sacrifices? Should I have been more forgiving? Should I have been more loving? Should I have been more caring? But at that stage, we're emotionally depleted. There's nothing else to give. And we've got to get on with our life. And a lot of people don't know how to articulate that guilt. It happens to parents. It happens to partners. It happens to employers where they give their team member all these opportunities, but at the end of the day, they don't do anything about it. And they say, I'm sorry, you got to leave this business. And then when they can't make their car repayment, they feel guilty for them. When they lose their house, they feel guilty.
Yeah.
And then the fifth type of guilt is, that's compassion fatigue. The final type of guilt is survivor guilt. And this is really unfortunate. It happens to people who survive major crises. So in Taiwan, we have a lot of earthquakes. And unfortunately, a lot of people die in the earthquakes. And sometimes it's young people who die. So mum and dad who might be in their 60s or 70s, they've got children in their early 20s or 30s. Mum and dad survive the earthquake, but the children die. And it's very hard for the parents to get over that guilt because they look to God and say, God, I've had 70 years on this planet. My child was only 20. They're at the start of their journey. You should have taken them, not me. And then instead of living that joy because you've got the gift of life and you've survived, you feel guilty for living. Where your child died and you think they should have had the gift of life rather than you. And they're the 5 forms of guilt. And once we start to understand guilt, we start to understand a lot of our behaviours and why we do and don't do certain things. So hopefully that's a different insight into the emotion of guilt.
I think people are going to go, oh my God, I didn't realise, like me. Like I know I've studied this, but I only use what I use, it's in the back of my mind. But that's a great reminder for people to have a certain type of emotion or feeling and really break it down for people so they can kind of go, wow, I'm sure people listening to this can resonate with one or all. Like you might actually have all and that's okay, but it's such a good breakdown to show people.
You mentioned before about the Lamborghini and, people not feeling deserving of it. A lot of times people feel guilty for having nice things. Sometimes the person's grown up on the wrong side of the track. They've worked hard, they've gone without for 20 or 30 years, and then they've struck gold and they've got it rich. But they feel guilty for having things that nobody else has.
Yeah.
And it happens with a lot of people that I work with. I mentioned a gentleman before, he's heading towards $5 billion in revenue for his business, but he grew up in the slums. His first job was washing plates. His second job, he'd had to travel 3 hours in each direction every single day to go to work. And he says to himself, I'm the fish that got out of the tank. I'm the one that got away. But oftentimes they get all these good things and they think, do I deserve it? They have that imposter syndrome. Is this a joke? Is somebody going to knock on my door one day and say, we got you, we're taking it all back? It's a very interesting emotion.
He does deserve it. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Everyone deserves it. Everyone deserves something that's nice because we all have a different level of what's important to us, but we all deserve a peaceful, loving life.
Yep. We all deserve peace of mind. It's our birthright to have peace of mind. And if we value the intangibles, we should make really good decisions to ensure that we preserve that peace of mind every day. And I think in this values level 6 community that is now developing, we're starting to see people value peace of mind more than they are the Rolex watch. What happened to Rolex during the pandemic? Prices of Rolex skyrocketed. I was going to buy one. I said to my wife, I've got some money in the bank. I'm going to buy a Rolex. I said, but I don't even wear a watch, so why buy a Rolex? And she said, well, you got the money, you can do it. I looked at the watch, it was $15,000. Halfway through the pandemic, it was $20,000. Towards the end of the pandemic, it was $25,000. Same watch went up by $10,000.
Wow.
Now you can buy Rolex anywhere, anytime, and they're back below $15,000. And a lot of people realize that the watch doesn't bring you happiness. Yeah. The watch doesn't bring you peace of mind.
I love how you brought that up, actually, because you won't know this. My grandfather used to make Rolex watches. He was a watchmaker.
Wow.
He actually used to make it. So I love that watches for me are very, so the last things that my father gave me was when I was 18, he got me a tag watch. And you can tell when your dad buys you something and you're a girl because it's not the feminine one. It wasn't the woman's. It was like the unisex one, which, hey, I'll take it, but I've still got it and it still looks good. But that's what I mean is you have an item. Sometimes these items can be sentimental and I don't bat an eyelid if someone says to me, I want to spend that on a watch. I'm like, I get it. Like, I'm like, cool, I absolutely get it. It's something that may mean like, hey, I'm going to get this sale or I'm going to get to this point. Every time I look at the watch, it's going to be a reminder. So it's with the materialistic stuff too. I get it. A lot of people go, oh, wow, you shouldn't spend that much on a watch or you shouldn't spend that much on a car or that. I'm just like, it's just a thing, but it's something that can bring you inner joy. Like I actually work quite well on that inner joy.
Yep. Well, when we have a look at your mind report, let's come back to your stress type, which is emotional, which is also what we call sentimental. And it will even bring more awareness to you why the watch has sentimental value, not material value, sentimental value. And that comes back to your stress type.
Okay. So we're going to go through my mind report before we wrap up. So the vocal, So I did the vocal biomarker technology. I read a
Yep.
script for Daniel and I sent it off to him. And as I was reading it, I was like, is this really going to be able to interpret everything about Barbara? So what we're going to do now is Daniel's going to share with us, and I'm going to be vulnerable sharing my stuff as I always am. Okay,
So
go.
let me put a little bit of a frame around the technology. What vocal biomarker technology does, it measures your brainwave frequencies that are found in your voice. So we're not measuring what you're saying, we're measuring the different brainwave frequencies in the voice. And it doesn't matter in the moment if we feel skeptical or not. It doesn't matter if we have cold or flu or not, because we're measuring brainwave frequencies. So what the technology does, it's been developed for over a period of 40 years. And what's happened in the past couple of years because of the pandemic, we ended up taking our technology and making it into vocal biomarker technology. Before, to get a similar assessment, we would have to connect electrodes to the skull that would measure brainwave activity, the electricity in the brain. But now we just do it through voice-activated technology. So what it does is it's listening into the brainwave frequencies, and we connect that to different emotions in the body. But to make a voice sound, it's the most complex thing that a human can do. What separates us from the animals? It's our ability to speak. Now, to speak, we have to use all of our brain function to speak. We have to engage 100 different muscles to create a speech sound. We have 43 muscles in the face. Your tongue has 8 different muscles. The masseter muscle in your jaw is the strongest muscle in the body. Now, if we have any inflammation, if we have any mental or emotional health problems, these affect the qualities of the voice. So for a moment, think about somebody who's happy and excited. When somebody who's happy and excited has got some really good news and they want to share with you, there's a lot of energy in the voice. There's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows. These people tend to speak really, really fast. Now, the difference is the quality of the voice is determined by their mental and emotional state. Mm-hmm. What about when somebody's sad and depressed?
Well, it's minimal talking and almost, yeah.
They trip over their tongue and they lose muscle coordination throughout the mind and the body. So people who are depressed tend to have less volume in their voice. They tend to have less energy. They talk and there's big gaps in their speech. And sometimes if you've ever listened to somebody who's sad, you're sitting there and you're thinking, can't you just get it out? Just tell me what you want to tell me. But they can't get it out because their mind and body, their systems, not operating together. So what this technology is doing, it's measuring the brainwave frequencies in the voice. Now, diseases like Alzheimer's, we can detect using this technology, and we can detect Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease with a 4-second voice sample. If we get somebody saying, ah, for 4 seconds, we can detect Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Now, we've been able to get there with millions and millions of case studies. When you use Alexa on your Google device and you say, hey, Alexa, can you please turn on the radio? Alexa, using our technology, also has the potential to identify depression or anxiety symptoms just in that one command. If you use Siri and say, hey, Siri, drive me home, and it activates the map, within that 4 to 7 second voice sample, it can detect anxiety and depression. Hospitals in India that are using this technology, in India, they have these huge populations. So you might have a population of 1 million people that go to one central hospital. But from that central hospital, there might only be 6 or 7 psychotherapists. Now, 6 or 7 psychotherapists can't help a population of 1 million people. So using this technology, what they do is they do a voice analysis before the person comes to the hospital. And if they're at risk for anxiety, depression, or stress, they get a priority appointment with the mental health specialist. And this has been able to significantly reduce the suicide rates in many countries around the world. This technology that you've experienced is also being used with healthcare providers in America and insurance companies. So when they're measuring your biomarkers for health, they can also measure your mental and emotional biomarkers just via speaking to you on the telephone. So the technology is phenomenal. We use it here in Taiwan. We have a relationship with one of our local hospitals, and people come to the hospital because of stress, anxiety, and depression. They take medication, but the problem doesn't disappear. So my wife, who's one of her top students in her Masters of Psychology program at Arizona State University, is the local mental health care advisor at the hospital. So when people have mental health issues, they use our technology at the hospital and they have an appointment with my wife. And so we work in conjunction with the hospital as complementary healthcare professionals.
Wow.
So this technology,
fantastic.
It's emerging. And how we're going to use it today for you is we're going to have a look at 3 parts of your personality. We're going to have a look at stress type. We're going to have a look at personality. And we're going to have a look at the 7 energy centers in your body. Now, for people who haven't heard of energy centers, you might have heard of chakras. And there's more than 5,000 years of research into that in Eastern medicine. So ready to learn, Barbara? Okay. So you've completed your 90-second voice report.
Yes.
And when we have a look at your stress type, we say that your stress type is emotional stress. Emotional stress, and I wrote it down before we got in here, is sentimental. It's to do with people. Your stress is to do with emotions. So when it comes to stress for you, you're going to lose sleep over people. Why is that important? Well, you're a therapist, and it means that you can understand people really well. And if your client's feeling a very strong emotion, chances are you're feeling it just as much as they are.
Yeah.
And so you already know what they're going through. What brings stress for you? It's anything with a heartbeat. I know recently you had one of your animals that passed away, and that would have been a very stressful time for you. Where a lot of people say it's just an animal, you'll say, no, it's my loved one. It's part of my family. And when we have emotional stress, we also tend to take on too much personally. We take on other people's problems as if they're our own. We want to help everybody with every problem that they've got. And that's the emotional type of stress for you. Now, the other thing that we've got to be aware of when we have emotional stress is for you, one of your superpowers is the ability to build rapport with anybody. So you can match and mirror and you can automatically feel what that other person's feeling. But when we're an emotional stressed person, we also become a highly sensitive being. And you'll end up taking on emotions that aren't yours. You'll feel other people's emotions and you'll tend to carry them as somebody who experiences emotional stress. Even when you're being a therapist and you're listening to other people's perspectives, you can also be a perspective taker where you'll feel different types of emotions that others might not feel. Now, other people probably call you intuitive. Yes, you are. You're very much in touch with your feelings. So that's the type of stress that impacts you. Does that make sense to you?
Sure does. Yep.
What stands out to you? What do you agree with? What don't you agree with?
No, I agree. I'm looking just at where the arrow sits on that yellow part. And I'm thinking, okay, is that not a good thing? Does it need to be on the far left to be low stress?
Mm-hmm. Well, what it means is that this type of stress is close to what's called compound stress. So we say there's 3 types of stress. We have logical stress, we have compound stress, and we have emotional stress. So what compound stress is stress that builds up over time. Okay. So compound stress, people compartmentalize things. They say, I'm not going to deal with that today. I'm just going to put it over there and I'm going to come back to it later on.
Yeah.
Other people just brush it under the rug. For you, you have emotional stress, and that kicks in at around about 16 to 25 points. It's not good or bad, right or wrong, high or low is not better or worse. What you'll also find is that this does change over time. So many years ago, I was high emotional stress. And what I'd do is I'd absorb everybody else's emotions. I would take on other people's problems as if it was mine. If my clients didn't do their tasking, I would lose sleep because they didn't do their tasking. With different regulation patterns, I've become more logical. And logical stress has to do more with building a business. It's more to do with our career. It can be current worries or uncertainties about the future. Where for you, yours is more sentimental. It relates to other people.
Yeah, interesting. I feel like that. I mean, that's a good representation of me, how I have been for most of my life. But I feel like I'm starting personally. I feel like that what you explained, the logical stress. I'm getting more towards that. But what I do for a job, I'm always going to. I have to do practices every day, cleanse myself and stuff to get these emotions off people.
So there's a fine distinction there between our stress type and our personality. And your personality style on the Enneagram is the Guardian style personality. Now, what you've got here is you've got an interesting combination because you have emotional type stress, but the Guardian is head-centered and logic.
Oh, okay. Right.
Okay, so what we say about people are complex and people are different. And in preparation for this, we can see that you've got emotional stress, but you're also a very head-centered person. So I'll explain to you what that one is. Does that make sense so far?
Yep, makes sense. Yep.
Okay. So your personality type is a type 6 personality, and that's the same personality style as Prince Harry and Marilyn Monroe. So as a type 6 personality, what you seek in your life is safety and security. You want to feel safe. You want to feel secure. But you're also very head-centered and also very logical. So for you, what you're very good at is you're also very good at taking action. You're a real doer. You're a type of girl who can get shit done. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. So now all of us have different fears based on our personality types. So based on the Guardian personality type, the emotion that you need to learn to manage throughout your life is the fear of making mistakes. So the question is, where do we get this fear of making a mistake? We develop this fear of making a mistake because we're criticized as a child. And because of a lot of criticism, we're worried about making mistakes in the future. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
So if people were to describe you and they hadn't met you before, they could describe you as reliable and trustworthy. And this is why you will make a great therapist, because people can trust in you. What they say to you remains behind closed doors. And you're not the type of girl to give anything 90% or 100%. When you go all in, you go all in at 110%.
Yes.
Is that you?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
Good. Excellent. And based on this personality type, the way that we develop this personality type is during our childhood, we're punished for making mistakes. And with that, there comes a lot of uncertainties about our future. What's our direction, where we're going? So does that make sense to you so far?
Yeah, a little bit. I'd flip that a little bit with me, because with my childhood, everything had to be perfect. And that's where the Marilyn Monroe comes in a little bit. Like, you have to be perfect and seen a certain way. Otherwise, it's not good enough. So it wasn't getting things right. It was like you have to be, it's the same thing, but different. You have to be perfect at everything and how you look.
110%.
Yeah. Otherwise, I won't give you any attention and you're dead to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's the Guardian personality. So what you can see here is that what you do best is you're very logical, but you're also very connected to your emotions. And so when you're in your therapy, you're doing therapy both left brain and right brain. You're connecting with them logically and you're connecting with them emotionally. You'll also be able to connect with people emotionally and help them make sense logically of what they're feeling. And so you'll tend to use different regions of your brain, where I think everybody has been to a therapist before. And the typical perception of a therapist is somebody like this. They wear their glasses on the tip of their nose, and they get their clipboard out, and they look over the glasses at the top of the nose, and they just analyse you. Nobody wants to be psychoanalyzed.
No, no, I actually had a therapist like that. When you talk about the personalities in your whole life, do you just get one, or can you actually change your personalities throughout your life?
You have two.
Oh, okay.
You have two Enneagrams. You have an Enneagram who you are now in the moment, and we also have an Enneagram style of who we're becoming in the future. And so a lot of people have this feeling, they go, you know what, Daniel, that makes a lot of sense of who I am right now and who have I been in the past, but I feel like I'm changing.
Yeah.
And so what you'll probably find as well is that we also have a style called the Reformer, and I'll see if you can see it there, Type 1. Type 1 is a perfectionist. Type 1's a perfectionist. And when I first experienced the Enneagram, I had been in a pattern of self-harm for many years. And when I learned more about the perfectionist style, I realised where the root cause of my self-harm had come from. And so for me, when I grew up, I had a disability called linear sequential learning disability. And the disability came about because my cranium, my plates in the cranium and the skull weren't formed properly, and they were pushing down on the left and right hemisphere of the brain. That created tone deafness. I could hear, but I couldn't hear different tones. I also had visual impairments. I had perfect 20/20 vision, but the information coming through the left and the right eye wasn't processing in the left and the right brain correctly. So what I would see on the board and what I would write on paper were totally different things. And so that stemmed from having an out-of-aligned neck, a curved spine, twisted hips and knees. And I struggled with that for about 5 years. And so for me, I was always making mistakes. I was always being criticised. And so the perfectionist wants everything to be perfect. Now, what's interesting is that a perfectionist is always in trouble from their parents for making mistakes. They go to class, they're always in trouble from their teachers for making mistakes. But once you leave school, there's nobody there to punish yourself. So what happens is you take the role of punisher. You make a mistake, you punish yourself through self-harm. So question, does it change? Yes, it does. And this is what I said earlier on, is that when I first learned about a lot of these technologies, they want to put you in a box. This is who you are, stay there. No, figure out who you are. Do you like that or not? And if not, start to change. So my personality has changed over time from the Reformer to the Guardian, the same as yours.
Yeah, I was looking at it going, oh, actually, I was looking at it going, oh, what else do I want to be? Because as you were telling me what my Guardian was, I was looking and you go, oh, what other ones do I want to be? Like there's a high achiever or something. I saw that and thought, oh, yeah, I want to be that. And I want to be that. Like I actually was looking at the other ones. I was like, can I be all of them?
Well, we do demonstrate characteristics of the personality traits that are close to us. So the Guardian will show traits of the investigator and the enthusiast. The Guardian can also aspire to be the achiever. So for me, I'm a former Australian champion athlete. I'm a 3-time state champion athlete. I've travelled around the world doing sports. I've competed at X Games, which is like the Olympics for wakeboarding.
Whoa, okay,
for
cool.
wakeboarding.
Cool.
So for me, I also have those traits of the achiever, but they're not all that strong anymore because I tend not to use them so much.
But you've got them there.
We've got them there and we all have access to them. We call this a mask. So what happens in life, sometimes we have to wear a mask. I was working with a client recently and she always wanted to be a doctor, but her parents wanted her to be an accountant. So she had to put on the accountant's face. She had to pretend that she liked to be an accountant. But in her heart of hearts, all she wanted to do was help people and be a doctor. So her true style is a Guardian, but for many years she had to wear a mask and become somebody else. And what eventually happens with this is it leads to psychosomatic illness. And psychosomatic illness is where the mind makes the body sick. And I think anybody who's been in a career that they don't really like for a long time, they end up with stiffness in their body. They have visual impairments. They have breakouts in pimples. One gentleman recently, he's highly conflicted in the work that he does, and he's got alopecia. So what we say is with emotions is that they come out in uglier ways.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we try to pretend to be something else.
Yeah.
So, yes, we can change. We have two styles. We have a style who we are now and a style that we're becoming in the future. And we see these little glimpses from time to time. We set a little bit different goal. We start to socialize in different areas. The personality traits come out.
Okay.
So it does change.
Nice.
Now, the next part is the mind-body connection. So if you've heard of the 7 energy centers, the 7 chakras, this is where the mind-body connection comes into place. Now,
I'm already laughing because I've looked at all the colors and looked across and gone, yep, I know that's high and that's low. Oh, that's interesting. So as you're talking, I've just skimmed across it and already analyzed myself.
Good. You tell me, what do you see?
No.
Tell me, because you'll be right.
Well, obviously it's to do with the highest chakra. Oh, they're pretty close. My third eye chakra is pretty close to my voice. Obviously, that connection, and the crown connection to the spiritual realm is pretty up there. The heart, the green is the heart, right? Yeah, that's
green
low.
is the heart.
But what I don't actually know too much about the solar plexus. Obviously, that's the lowest. I don't really know what that is, to be honest.
Okay. Well, we'll start on the right-hand side, and we have 7 chakras, and there's going to be 3 states. They're balanced, they're too high, or they're going to be too low. And each of these chakras have their own frequency. For example, the root chakra has a frequency of 396 hertz. The sacral chakra has a frequency of 417 hertz, and they all have their own frequency. Now, if there's too much energy in the chakra, there can be a long-held implant or an addiction. If the chakra doesn't have enough energy in it, it needs stimulation so it's healthy once again. So when we look at these chakras, we have a look at them from right to left, starting at the root, which is number 1, all the way up to the crown, which is number 7.
Okay.
So just by looking at these, and I don't know enough about you yet to fully understand them, but we'll go through one by one. The root chakra for you is balanced. So the first thing that tells us is that you're going to live in the moment. You're the person who's very present and in the moment right now. And what's going to be important for you is self-care and being physically fit. You should also have a very nutrient-rich diet at the moment. Does that sound like you?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Now, you can also see here that when we have a look at the sacral chakra and the solar plexus chakra, they are too low. There's not enough energy in there at the moment. Now, I already know the answer because I was listening to one of your podcasts, and when you were growing up, you got a lot of negative comments from your family about your weight, specifically your dad. What did he say? You never have to worry about Barbara eating? Is that what he said?
Yeah. One of my girlfriends went to hospital for anorexia, and he, kind of smashed me on my back in front of, we own petrol stations, so you can imagine rush hour. And they were all guys. I was standing at the counter with Dad, and all these guys were lined up outside the door, and I was telling him about my friend that was in hospital with anorexia, and he just kind of slammed me on my back and said out loud to everyone, "Oh, don't have to worry about you. You're my big daughter. You'll never not eat." And I just remember going bright red, going, "I just want to die right now. I'm so embarrassed." And the ironic thing back then, I was a very lean, athletic girl. I just had an athletic body as a girl, but I was never fat or overweight when I was a kid, ever. That was his perception of me, trying to keep me small because he didn't want boys to look at me. But boys looked at me all the time, and I don't think as a dad, I don't think he liked boys looking at me. So yeah.
So that's normally what happens when we have some body image issues. The solar plexus and the sacral plexus chakra tends to be less active. Now, you also did a post on your Facebook page on the 18th of January this year, and you said that you don't love photos of yourself. Is that true?
Yep.
That was your post?
Never have.
So when that happens, it's because that solar plexus, that self-confidence within ourself isn't there. And so these are some of the things that lead us to the root cause of why we do and don't do what we do.
That makes sense.
Over the past years, have you had any toxic relationships at all?
All my relationships have been toxic until 2018, my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, without going too deep into it today, whenever we have a less active sacral chakra here, we've had toxic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So that stands out there. And we call this a little bit of a scarring on the soul. And these things can stay with us for a lifetime. And it's something that we've got to learn to work with. Sometimes we can heal it, but sometimes it's something within us that we just have to learn to live with in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Does that
Well,
make sense?
it's interesting to see that it's that low because I have done a lot of work on it. We'll always work on it. But I am a little bit surprised that that sacral, that one, the orange one, is as low, as low as it is. I feel like that's the past. Yeah.
Mm. So a lot of work that we tend to do in therapy is we'll work with the conscious and the unconscious mind, where energy in the body is a different approach. So when we work with chakras and we change the energy, we actually use vibrational medicine to increase the vibration.
Mm.
So that's a whole different story in another episode altogether. Now, the solar plexus chakra here as well, you've got a less active solar plexus and a less active sacral chakra. In the last couple of weeks, have you been feeling tired, fatigued?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Okay. So you can see there, fatigue and chronic fatigue. Whenever we're really tired, we're really exhausted, we can have less energy in the solar plexus and the sacral chakra.
Mm.
It also comes down for women specifically. How's your menstrual cycle been recently? Has it been unpredictable?
Always perfect.
Always perfect. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So chronic fatigue and fatigue impact both the solar and the sacral plexus as well. Your immune system there, which is related to your heart chakra is also connected to your thymus. So over the past 3 to 6 months, have you had any illness at all?
No.
Any cold or flu?
No.
Okay.
Oh, one about to start. Like haven't had COVID or I haven't been sick for a long time, for a few years
Yep.
now, but I'll get a bit of throat or some mucus and I'll take my supplements and the next day I'm okay. So
Okay.
I have had a little bit of something, but not a full
Okay.
blown anything.
So specifically when we have ears, nose and throat issues, there's going to be an imbalance in the throat chakra. So you can see there that the blue bar there for you, your throat chakra is overactive. Now, when we have an overactive throat chakra and we have, what do you see?
I'm just reading what you write. And I was like, I think every teacher in the world that ever taught me will tell you that. Yeah.
Now, my son has an overactive throat chakra and he talks from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to sleep.
That was me. Yep.
And this is how our energy centers also impact our behaviors. So one of the other things that we've got to learn to manage here is that when we have an overactive throat chakra and a less active heart chakra, sometimes that's when we become overly self-critical. And coming back to what I saw on Facebook was that you don't love photos of yourself. When we have an overactive throat chakra and the heart chakra is out of balance, well, yours is just on balance. When it's leaning towards unbalance, we become very critical of ourself. And these are the root causes of why we do some certain things. Have you had depression in the past?
I would say in the past, slightly. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Sure.
So whenever we have an overactive throat chakra, oftentimes it's connected to depression. Now, depression isn't always clinical depression. Depression's also just an extended sadness.
For me, it was a lot of grief. So I think, I would kind of categorize those. The depression and the grief would be together. Absolutely. Yeah.
What did the grief stem from?
Oh, I think it would be when I was younger and not having the parents that I thought I would have wanted and they failed me walking away from my marriage and then moving countries and then the death of my two dogs and so on, so on. So there's been a lot of moments in time for sure.
Mm. When we have those long-held griefs, then the heart chakra becomes less active. And so that could also point to why that heart chakra is less active. Also, you focus a lot on empathy and self-love and self-care. And that's probably what's bringing that energy up for you at this time.
Yeah.
So our goal in life and through meditations and through therapy is to balance ourselves out in all of these areas. But being overactive and underactive sometimes has its benefits. So what you'll see here is with your crown and third eye chakra, both of these are overactive. Having an overactive third eye chakra gives you a very strong intuitive ability. It enables you to have a form of psychic insight. Also, having an overactive crown chakra also helps with intuitive abilities. So when you're sitting with your clients, do you just have a sensation of you know what's happened? You get that feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And you test it out with them. They're like, how did you know that?
Yeah. And sometimes I test it out and they say that I'm wrong, but I'm like, So, yeah, it works both ways.
Yep. So what tends to happen is when we have an overactive third eye chakra, we're not always in an environment where we can test it out. And so for me, when I was younger, I would have intuitive experiences. And I remember one very clearly. I woke up in the morning and I said to myself, I know the lottery numbers. And it sounded crazy. And there used to be this thing called Powerball. And I knew every single number that was coming out of the Powerball that night. But a 9-year-old saying that to their parents, hey, Mum, I know all the Powerball numbers. I just kept it to myself. Anyway, I went to school and I thought about it all day and I came home and I watched the Powerball that night and every single number in the same order and sequence popped out of that machine. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I saw this in my dream. And so I was always very intuitive. But when I shared those things, I was often criticised.
Of course.
When I'd have strange dreams, I'd be criticised. But when I learned to become a coach, I realised that was my superpower and I just had to frame it correctly. And I noticed something that was very fascinating with listening to some of your work. You said in your podcast intro that you'd never listened to your intuition. So when there's a combination of an active crown chakra, an active third eye, and a balanced root chakra, we know that this person's very intuitive. And what you've got access to your right brain, but also with your guardian type personality, you're also very logical with the left brain as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm waiting for you to go, boom, 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 and here's the final answer. It's not very good. You're fucked.
Well, what we aim to do is to have self-understanding. And when it comes to emotional intelligence, we say, if you can't name it, you can't tame it. But my belief also is that people are very good at regulating their behaviours. And if you know that something's hurting you, most people will stop it very quickly. If people know that there's some type of strength that they have but they're not using it, they can learn to harness and use it really quickly. Like intuition for me. What I learned through coaching was that intuition was very important. Intuition is very important in coaching. And I asked one of my trainers, how do I express intuition? And he said, Daniel, this is how you express it. You say to your client, feel free to accept or reject what I'm about to say. And then you share your intuition. And then you sit there and listen. And you're not connected to it in any way, meaning that if they say no, it's not right. Or it is, it doesn't matter to you anyway. It's called outcome independence. It's like, yeah whatever.
I've been taught by my mentor who's helping me harness. It's interesting that that's higher because I'm doing a lot of work with my archetypes and I'm doing a lot of work on all that kind of stuff with myself. And she said, you need to practice with your clients. And she taught me one way is to go, and if anyone wants to listen to this, but they're saying, I get it it's a fleeting moment. I'll get a word or I'll get a picture, I'll get something. And she says, I want you to use it straight away and just go, hey, I've got a question. I'm quite curious to know. I'm just wondering, and I could be wrong. And I kind of put it that way. And then it puts it on like, I got the wrong idea. I'm really sorry. So that's how I will address intuition or kind of inner knowing is I'll go, I've got a question. I'm probably so way off here, but why am I getting this feeling of whatever? And then I kind of just leave it there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we have a left brain, which is very logical. We have a right brain, which is very emotional. And the right brain feels, and the left brain thinks. And the right brain passes emotions to the left brain to make sense of. And when we look at people's left and right brain balance, some people can live in a very emotional world. They're very emotional, but they can't articulate what they feel. But through working with your higher sense and working with archetypes, we end up balancing the left and right brains. And so we can articulate the intuition. And everybody's intuitive. Men and women's intuitive abilities are exactly the same. The only difference is women tend to listen to their intuition more than men. That's the only difference. So we all have it.
I want people to hear that. I want people, the men in their life or any guys that are listening to this, you've got it too, because I don't think guys would be I don't have that.
Well, you said it perfectly at the start of the conversation, is we're very quick to negate things. So statistically, it's been proven that we're exposed to 4 $1 million ideas every single year. We're exposed to them. We think about them. But when we get that intuitive hit, we say to ourselves, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I could make $1 million, but it's not in my field of expertise. I don't know anything about that subject. For me, I was walking around the streets here in Taiwan one day, and I thought to myself, what we need an app on our phone. And you should be able to take a picture of a dangerous driver or somebody who's parked on the road stupidly. You should be able to upload that to an app, and you should be able to get a commission from the government for reporting a bad driver when they get fined. That was my $1 million idea. But then I thought to myself, what a stupid idea. I live in Taiwan. I don't understand the language. I don't know anything about coding. I don't understand anything about apps. I'm a coach. I got that idea. About 12 months later, somebody launched an app in Dubai. And they said, what you can do with this app is you can take a photo of a dangerous driver and you can send it to the police and you'll get a reward for doing that. And I thought to myself, that was my $1 million idea. But because I came up with it, I was like, well, it's a stupid idea because I don't know anything about that. It was like when I had that intuition about those lottery numbers.
Yeah.
I'm 9 years old. The conditioning comes in. I'm 9-year-old. Who's going to believe me? I don't know anything. If I spend $10 on a ticket and I waste my mum's money, I'm going to be in trouble. So we get $4 million ideas every year, but we don't act on them. So we've got to learn to act on it. And it's when we act on it, we start to get phenomenal results.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think that will help so many people, because so many people have so many ideas flying in their head and they go, oh, no, oh, that's just silly.
I was in real estate, and when I was trained in real estate, intuition was very important. And my boss said to me, Daniel, if you're driving down the street and you get a feeling that somebody's going to sell their house, stop the car and knock on the doors. You'll find a home seller. Now, you tell that to an 18-year-old and they laugh. Anyway, I was driving home from work and I was driving down the street and I kind of looked over to my right-hand side and I thought to myself, somebody's selling. So I pulled over and I stopped the car. I put my hand in my pocket and I realised I didn't have my business cards. So I made my first excuse. Well, if I knock on the door and I don't have business cards, they probably don't believe I'm a real estate agent. So that was the first bullshit excuse. The second bullshit excuse was like, it's 6 o'clock, it's getting dark. They probably won't want somebody knocking on the door at 6 o'clock at night. I may as well just go home and I'll come back and I'll do it tomorrow. Now, as the Arabs say, Bukra inshallah, God willing, tomorrow never comes. And so the next day I drove down the street, I didn't do it. The day after I drove down the street, I didn't do it. The next week I drove down the street and my biggest competitor had a for sale sign right out in front of the house. They sold that one. They sold the one next door. They sold the one across the street, and they made about $100,000 on the street that my office was on. And I had that intuitive hit. I knew somebody was selling, but I didn't do anything about it.
But then you could use that as, even though you didn't do anything about it, did that give you that, okay, I'm got to trust that I was right. Did that give you a bit more gumption, a bit more like feeling in your gut next time it happens, you'll actually follow through with it, or did you still ignore it?
Knowing what I now know, I don't ignore it. Back then, I just thought it was luck. I just thought it was chance. But I'd even been told by a mentor to do it.
Yeah.
So we oftentimes get good information from mentors or from whatever you want to call it, consciousness, universe, God, but we don't act on it. And sometimes in life, we've got to experience a lot of pain to realise that we should have taken action. I remember when I was in the sport of wakeboarding, nobody taught me about mindset. And I was afraid. I was afraid to crash. I was afraid to get hurt.
Yeah.
And I was also afraid to share that with other people because I thought they might judge me. I thought they might criticise me for having these fears. So I never asked for help because back then the idea was that asking for help was a sign of weakness. But as I've got older, I realised that asking for help is a sign of strength. And when you ask for help, there's so many people who will come and help you. And so going through those experiences and realising what I lost or what I could have had definitely changes the way I approach things today. Today, if there's an intuition there, I'll always test it. Whether I'm right or wrong, I'll test it. But over time, I keep realising I was right.
Yeah, the same with me. Yeah, and I believe in that now. I believe in everything I think and feel. And one big thing that I've picked up is everyone that I meet now is coming to me for a reason. I'm learning from them. They're learning from me, but there's a reason why you're in front of me today for whatever reason. And it's so amazing. Like I've now understood that all the energetic stuff as well as who I'm pulling into my life and what I'm learning from that is, and I would never think like this. So I didn't even talk like this. I didn't think like this. I think on one of my podcasts, I was like, literally, if you could think of Barbara being the most less spiritual, less woo-woo, less anything, I would have gone, there's something like you're a hippie or you're weird or you're like, ooh, almost like gypsy vibes, like go away. And now things in my life that have happened that I cannot ignore it. And now I was reminded by my mentor, she's like, actually, as a little girl, you had all of this and it freaked people out. So you shut it down.
Yep.
The way I looked, it's interesting you brought up Marilyn Monroe because that is my strongest archetype is Marilyn Monroe. I'm very much like her in all sorts of ways.
In our business, and when I'm training coaches, I say in our business, you end up profiting from your pain. And an example of that is in 2009, I met my wife and we were both working with Emirates Airline. And I'd learned a lot about spirituality and I learned a lot about attraction and manifestation. And my wife, my girlfriend at that stage, she was saying to me, I want a job where I get paid to do nothing. And I said, well, where I come from in Australia, that sounds like workers' compensation. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, in Australia, if you get hurt on the job, you get paid whether you work or not. And she said, no, that's not what I want. And I said, well, what do you want? She said, I don't know. I said, do you want to work in the missionaries in Africa? She said, no, I don't want to do that. And over this 6-month period, Barbara, she kept repeating these words, I want to get a job where I get paid to do nothing. And I said to her one day, I said, you got to be careful what you wish for because you might just get it. Now, a couple of months after that, I got a telephone call, 4 a.m. in the morning, and my duty controller from Emirates Airline called me and said, Daniel, this is the duty controller. This is not a peer support call because I was a member of peer support. And I said, well, if it's not a peer support call, what is it? He said, there's been an accident on the aircraft and it involves your fiancé. Would you come down to the landside hospital immediately? This is at 4 o'clock in the morning. I jumped out of bed, I jumped in the taxi, went straight to the landside hospital, and here's my fiancée in a stretcher. And she's bandaged up from the ankle to the hip. And what had happened was, as the aircraft was coming into Dubai to land, she had a fall in the back of the aircraft and she fractured her knee in 5 places. And they rushed her in for an emergency surgery and they wanted to remove the kneecap to reduce the swelling. And I said, look, I would prefer if you don't remove the kneecap, if you can try to preserve it. And they said, look, we want to remove the kneecap. She'll be okay without a kneecap. And I thought to myself, a leg without a kneecap? That's a little bit weird. I said, look, just do your best to preserve the kneecap. And so they did an emergency surgery. They reduced the swelling. They put the kneecap back together with pins and steel cables. And then the next day we met with the surgeon, and the surgeon said to my wife, congratulations, you're going to have a job where you get paid to do nothing. We've done the first surgery on your knee. You'll need another 2 surgeries and you'll have to learn how to walk again. So over the following 2.5 years, she got a job where she got paid to do nothing. And that was a very painful experience for her, painful emotionally, because she ended up in depression, painful spiritually because she loved doing that job and now she had to suffer that pain. So at the end of that, she fell pregnant. She was 4 months pregnant. She then lost her job when she was 4 months pregnant. And the stress was so great that she came close to miscarriage 3 times. So she went through a lot of pain. And then through a period of 10 years, she rehabilitated herself, learned to walk again, and totally re-educated herself. And what I say to her now is, because she went through that painful experience, you can now profit from it by helping people get through theirs or avoiding it altogether.
Yeah.
And so as therapists and coaches, we often take a different path in life. We experience different types of pain and heal ourselves to prove to ourselves that healing is possible. Mm-hmm. It's like we've drunk from the cup and then we say to other people, you can heal yourself. You don't need me to heal you. Yeah. It's all within you. And I'll just take you on that journey. I'll guide you through to self-healing. And so we've got to profit from the pain.
That's so lovely.
Yes, thank you.
That's such a nice, well, it's not a nice experience for your wife, but I'm glad that she's all okay now. And look, I'm sure that she's probably the happiest that she's ever been, and can't believe that was almost her premonition of that was her path, and that was going to unfold in that way.
It's a fork in the road. We always have a choice.
Yeah.
And life will give us what we want. And coming back to language, as we spoke about before, you ask an Aussie, how you doing? Not bad. How's the weather? Could be worse. How are the kids? Not in prison yet. How's the missus? Well, I ain't divorced yet. We've got to learn to say it how we want it. And if we say it how we want it, we'll manifest and attract what we want versus what we don't want.
Yeah, I'm working on it now. And it's interesting. I've got some really strong, I said it on a podcast the other day. I started to get some really strong intuition, what would you call them? Words, feelings about certain things in my life. And now I'm like, okay, what's going to happen? How's it going to unfold? So that's where I'm at now, is now I'm trusting it. And now I know everything I'm feeling and seeing is so true. I'm so excited, but I'm kind of like, okay, I'm getting all this information. When is it going to happen? And when am I going there? And what's going to happen there? And it involves America. It's interesting you mentioned New York today, because that's exactly New York and Texas are the 2 places. And I'm looking at writing a book. So I think so that's how my life is unfolding, is I'm getting these words, getting these feelings where I would have just said, shut up. You don't know anything. That's not going to happen. And now it just keeps getting repeated to me over and over again. And now I sit with it and go, cool. Okay. I'm going to write it down. I've earmarked on some podcasts, so I can go back and go, oh my gosh, look how strong the inner voice is. So I've got these really cool moments in time now, how my life is unfolding, that I've written them down and documented. And I'm just going, cool, can't wait for that. In the meantime, I'm going to put my head down and keep going, but I'm looking forward to what's going to happen.
Do it. As we say, same message, different masters. So many people come and say the same thing until the universe, or whatever we want to call it, gets our attention.
Yeah.
It's like we were talking offline before about our belonging place. The Maoris call it a Tudonga Waiwai. We all have a place where we belong. And when I went to Dubai in 2007 for the first time, I went this stayed there for 5 years. And after 5 years, I said, this is no longer my belonging place. And then I went to Taiwan, and I've been here since 2012. So 13 years now.
Wow.
And I love it. And, even Jesus the Christ, if you've read the Bible, oftentimes a prophet has no honour in his or her own land. And when you take all of your life experiences and your skill sets and you just change your environment, you get a totally different response. It's like Jesus, he had all of that, and he went out into the world and explored the world, and people went, wow, what a phenomenal person. And so you've got to find your belonging place, wherever that is, and have the courage to step out and try new things.
Yeah, that's what's on the horizon. But before we wrap up, I wonder if anyone's listening to this, where can they find you? Where can people connect if they've listened to this and they would like to do this biomarker technology, vocal biomarker technology with you or work with you? Like, who do you take on? How can they get in contact with you?
Best place, go to my website, danieltolson.com. On the top right-hand side of the website, there'll be a button that says Programs, and you can have a look at the Mind Report on there, or you can find my books on Amazon. I think I've authored 23 books now. I'm writing one at the moment on leadership. The one in the background just here, this is called Use Your Ears for a Change, and this book is all about the vocal biomarker technology and how we use this for vibrational medicine and healing. So if you want to read that book, read that one. Great book.
So would that have some stuff in there about how to work on the other chakras that are out of line for me if I buy that book? Are there certain practices in there that could help me with the couple that are out of line?
Yep. The best one for you to read would be Use Your Ears for a Change. And then I've got another book there called Better Health. And specifically in Better Health, we talk about case studies on the energy centers. And then there's another book called Start with Sleep, where there's case studies on vocal biomarker technology and the use of vibrational medicine or sound frequency therapy to realign the chakras. So we don't do talk therapy anymore. We use the science of vibrational medicine to align the chakras. And that happens really fast. It just happens in 15 minutes. No talking anymore.
Well, that's what I'm going to start to do. I've already written down vibrational medicine, and I know that's where I'm going to take my practice. So these are the things that I already know. Like when you gave me that word, I put it down. I've heard someone tell me that that's what I'm doing. A couple of years ago, I laughed at them and went, vibrational medicine. Yep. Now you're telling me again, and I go, yep. And I already know, and a knowing, I'm going to be doing sound frequency with my clients.
Yep. Go to my website, danieltolson.com, get to the root. Mm-hmm. And that will talk about the future of vibrational medicine.
Cool.
I know you'll like that one.
Well, I'm going to buy those 3 books. I'm going to buy those 3 books, and then I've got a library in my studio. So once I've read them, I give them to my clients.
Beautiful. I'll show you what they look like. There's Better Health.
Yeah.
That's all about self-healing. This one's on the science of DISC. This is about knowing yourself, which is about the Enneagram personality. This is all about our stress types. And this is about Chinese medicine and how sleep can help us improve our health.
Love that. Yep.
And then if you just want to make a lot of money and make sales, that one.
Yep. Always want to make more money. I'm definitely going to pull those up. Honestly, Daniel, this has just been a real, I feel like pleasure is a disservice to speaking with someone like you, that just your knowledge and your experience and just your bandwidth of the type of people you rub shoulders with every day is just, thank you for just taking the time out of your day just to talk with me today. Like, I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Let's do it again.
Yep, I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope this conversation has added value to your self-care journey and inspired positive changes in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it with a friend who might benefit from this episode. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or on your favourite podcast platform to stay up to date on future episodes. Your support means the world to me. I genuinely love hearing from you, so please take a moment to leave a review. Let me know which part of today's episode resonated with you the most. Your feedback guides the direction of this podcast, and I really appreciate each and every single one of you for being a part of this community. To fall in love with yourself is the first secret to happiness. To find out a bit more about the Studio Chat podcast, head over to my Instagram page, Studio Chat Podcast, or if you want to find out a bit more about my counselling private practice, head over to Instagram on self_care_studio. I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep embracing the journey of self-discovery.